Hi, everyone. Welcome to Naturally Immune for Life. Guess what's here? It finally arrived. And I know you are probably not going to see that because of the crappy computer camera. But, and I don't know why I got my copy later than most people, but I got it August 9th, I believe. But it's finally here, and I'm very happy about it. I think it's portable enough that you can carry it with you, and most importantly, it is at a much better price point as opposed to this very expensive but beautiful, beautiful full color book. And I was surprised a little bit. I forgot that I did cover HMOs. I forgot what I wrote about in my own book. But this one is no longer available. If I ever make it available again in a PDF format, you'll be the first to know. And I can do that now since it's unpublished, but whether I am, I don't know. Just because I prefer to have the best out there for you. And thank you so much for the review. My new friend in Canada, at least I hope we'll be new friends. I don't want to give your name in public, but I thank you so much. And people really, it's going to be reviews that are going to help get this off the ground unless I can get some other type of publicity. I don't know. But, okay, let's get started today. We have another major landmark review, and saying some things that were quite astounding, but let's get started. Have you ever wondered why you can work so hard to improve one aspect of your health, only to find another problem appears somewhere else? Maybe you're one of the lucky few who did just have to tweak one thing or another to make a great impact, but worldwide and especially US statistics show you probably are not. So what if the answer isn't another drug, another bad diet, or treatment aimed at one isolated symptom, but understanding the system that connects your entire body? This was my story from age 26 on, from birth actually, but when my health problems began to snowball and accrue, compound damage after a life-threatening health crisis, and that was sepsis. So I no longer had leaky gut sepsis, chronic inflammation. I had major sepsis until one doctor saved my life. Until I began to see things differently and change course. Prior to that, I did have more than one health crisis, but the young body has some amazing compensatory systems to keep you alive until a tipping point, and from that point on, it is usually a sliding scale downwards as your body struggles to maintain homeostasis and optimization. Add to that the sad diet, and it becomes almost impossible. By sad, I mean standard American diet. So that was one condition I suffered, and you might wonder why I don't make this channel all about one of my many conditions. Um, and I just don't, because generally, when people find me, they are at the worst part of their life. They're in despair. They have tried everything. They have a shelf full of books. They have shelves full of pills, drugs, supplements. They have rooms full of accoutrement like massagers, heat massagers, light therapy. What else? All kinds of tens, units, all kinds of things to mostly to deal with, mitigate and deal with pain. They have drawers full of ointments. In addition to the supplements, they have shelves full of herbs, vitamins. And then, in addition to all of that, they have drawers full of ointments, creams, all of that. Mostly, generally doing not much of anything. So by the time they they find me, they're very skeptical. They are in despair. They are hopeless. They are confused. And they are broke. So that is why I do not go around explaining every leaf on the tree, because I was in the same place. And at that point, I had nothing left to lose or use except my brain, and try to find my way out of my own quagmire. So you should think of it like, I don't do that because that's not the way it works. That's not where the health system is going. And we should be and or reducing complexity to simplicity. So you can think of it like a tree. Um, the roots, everything began with a seed, but the roots are underground. Everything converges to the trunk, then the branches, then the leaves. So why would anyone go around and say, okay, you one little leaf, I'm going to, if I take care of you, everything else is going to be okay. And that's not the way it works. So I don't do that. And I don't see the point of doing that because, as I said, by the time most people do find me, they have a list of conditions about this long. And that would just be futile. So, like a tree, everything converges in the trunk, everything has a root, and everything has a seed. And then maybe everything will branch out again from the trunk, as in medicine today, where it's going to be networks out of necessity, but still, for the most part, everything converges in the trunk, and that is what is going to hold everything together. So that is just one little part of my story, and one of the health problems we think of as separate, our immune system, our metabolism, energy, inflammation, and even the brain aren't really separate at all. What if they are constantly communicating through the trillions of microbes living inside us? For years upon years, we've been told to look at each disease, each symptom, and each body system It's its own problem, and we had a specialist to match. But a growing body of new research is revealing a very different picture. Compounds produced by our gut bacteria, such as butyrate, can influence immune regulation, inflammation, cellular energy, metabolism, and the gut brain connection. That changes the way we need to talk about health. And that is just one. And today we're going to be talking about butyrate again. Butyrate again, and this floodgate of a review. So then, what if I told you there are only about 4 or 5 substances in this system that influence the majority of others, the critical few among the trivial many in the network? And then, what if I told you that for the most part, you can't micromanage this vast network of cellular communication and crosstalk, but you can supply the foundations quite easily? People rarely think or go beyond the water they are swimming in to realize, one, things are not as they have always been, and two, there are a few truly unique substances that formed human biology. And then, long before their current reality, there was a break in that continuity that reshaped biology and greatly influenced the majority of our current quote unquote modern health conditions almost simultaneously around the globe, but only in varying degrees. So, naturally immune for life, that's me, explores this bigger and smaller picture, how the microbiome, immune system, nutrition, and the body's natural biology work together, how they were formed from the beginning as the first diet, representing the beginning of the food chain itself, and why rebuilding that foundation is one of the most important conversations we can have about lifelong health. So, again, I don't specifically name conditions, but because I'm I was where you are probably. That's where most people are when they find me. And if I hadn't been at that place, would I have had to rely on um, at that place? By that place, I mean broke and in despair. And if I weren't in that place, would I have had to rely on baking soda, zinc, and a specific form of magnesium to get myself back off the couch again? No, I would not have been, unless I was probably where you are right now. And that's what my mission is, to say, okay, well, that was, I don't know how many years ago that was now, but trust me, I was there. So today's post is going to be about butyrate again. And this is a review paper, basically. And it comes from a part of the world where you would not expect it to be coming from, which is the Arab and Arab population, if I remember correctly. So, beyond the gut, the full therapeutic potential of butyrate. And another thing, we're going back from the tree to the roots, and we're just going to explore some of these substances. Do I generally believe you can micromanage this if you get your gut health back in order? Probably not. You just need to eat the foods that contribute to producing butyrate generally. But I do have info here if you do want to try a supplement. And I usually do choose myself or someone in my family to be that guinea pig, and I will let you know what they think. So, although butyrate absorption into circulation is typically minimal, its broader health implications are substantial. Butyrate possesses systemic and anti-inflammatory properties, particularly its capacity to reduce pro-inflammatory cytokines and maintain immune homeostasis. Now, is that the only thing that does that? No. Highlighting its therapeutic potential in managing dysbiosis and inflammatory diseases. And in part, this arises from their end because they don't make whole drugs. There's no such thing as a whole drug, as in WHOLE. They might make a complex, a synthetic, but they generally don't make whole drugs. So if they want to use something and combine it with another something, they have to break it down to its basic parts and then rebuild it. So this is why this in part leads to the supplement race, but that's the reason why that happens. So, although, okay, it's minimal, it's substantial, especially regarding obesity and type 2 diabetes through its influence on metabolic regulation and inflammation. This narrative review thoroughly examines butyrate's growing recognition as a modulator of neurological health via its interaction with the gut-brain axis. Additionally, butyrate's neuroprotective effects are mediated through activation of specific G protein coupled receptors such as FFAR3, GPR109A, and inhibition of histone deacetylanases. This focus will help unlock its full therapeutic potential for metabolic and neurological health, rather than exclusively on its well-known benefits for gut health, as these are interconnected. So the microbiota plays a critical role in immune disorders, and I went over that. And I included other cells, T cells, dendritic cells, but it also briefly mentioned short-chain fatty acids. And these help turn T cells on and off and keep the immune system balanced. So that's the connection between all of that. So beyond gut health, how butyrate may support metabolic and neurological health. Butyrate is best known as a short-chain fatty acid produced when beneficial gut bacteria ferment dietary fiber and resistant starch. It is an important energy source for colon cells and helps maintain the intestinal barrier. But research is increasingly suggests that its influence extends far beyond the gut. A 2025 narrative review in Nutrients examines butyrate as a metabolic and neurological signaling molecule, highlighting its effects on inflammation, immune regulation, energy metabolism, gene expression, and the gut-brain axis. And last week we primarily talked about the mitochondria as part of that. The emerging picture is that gut health, metabolic health, and neurological health are not separate systems. They communicate continuously through microbial metabolites, such as butyrate. So, infancy and beyond, you may be wondering if we are fermenting fibers to make butyrate. How does the infant get butyrate? And one of the ways is their role as prebiotics. and some microbes that metabolize HMOs, and they help produce butyrate, even though that infant isn't chomping on apples or carrots. Um, let's see what happens specifically. Well, anyway, we know it does. Well, okay. Beneficial microbes metabolize HMOs and produce compounds such as short chain fatty acids, including acetate, propionate, and butyrate. Butyrate in the gut, where the influence begins. Butyrate is one of the major short chain fatty acids produced by the gut microbiome. So, most intestinal butyrate comes from bacterial fermentation of non digestible carbohydrates, particularly dietary fiber and resistant starch. Certain species contribute to its production. Butyrate is rapidly taken up by colonocytes, where it serves as an important metabolic fuel. It also influences the intestinal barrier, immune signaling, and inflammatory pathways. The intestinal barrier is more than a physical wall. It helps determine which microbial products remain inside the intestine and which can interact with the immune system or enter circulation. Butyrate supports tight junction integrity and can influence inflammatory signaling through receptors. And then one of the most important things in this particular paper is going to be it can also inhibit enzymes called histone deacetylases or HDACs, creating an additional route through which it can influence cellular behavior and gene expression. So, one of the latest areas of butyrate research involves energy metabolism. Obesity is closely associated with chronic low-grade inflammation, altered energy regulation, insulin resistance, and changes in the microbiome. The review describes evidence linking reduced abundance of butyrate-producing bacteria with metabolic disorders and suggests that butyrate may influence energy balance, fat metabolism, and inflammatory pathways. Much of the strongest mechanistic evidence comes from animal studies. And of course, they're starting with mice and rats. In high-fat diet models, butyrate increased AMPK, improved insulin sensitivity, increased energy expenditure, and stimulated mitochondrial biogenesis. AMPK functions as an important cellular energy sensor, while mitochondrial biogenesis increases the capacity of cells to produce and manage energy. These findings are particularly interesting because they connect the gut microbiome with the body's fundamental energy producing machinery. Type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance. Type 2 diabetes involves impaired insulin signaling and declining pancreatic beta cell function, with insulin resistance playing a central role. Research summarized in the review suggests a relationship between butyrate production, gut microbial composition, glucose regulation, and insulin sensitivity. Human genomic and microbiome data have found that higher butyrate production can be associated with better insulin response to glucose. And animal experiments provide additional clues, specifically regarding HDACs, which are key elements in the development of type 2 diabetes, as they significantly influence both lipid and glucose metabolism. We connection between butyrate, HDACs, and type 2 diabetes suggests a potential novel clinical strategy in this context. Some other studies also investigated the association between HDAC inhibition and butyrate supplementation. In one study, sodium butyrate was administered alongside metformin to explore its effect on diabetes-related disorders in rats. Findings showed that both sodium butyrate and metformin significantly reduced fat accumulation or dyslipidemia and insulin resistance. I have a typo there. Additionally, glucose management improved and histological damage in specific liver and pancreatic tissues was mitigated when sodium butyrate and metformin were used together. HDAC activity was suppressed and glucogenesis were specifically reduced due to changes in the Burkitt box protein O1 and glucogen expression. I'm pretty sure they also separated them to see how they worked independently of each other. So cardiovascular health and hypertension. The effects of butyrate may also extend to cardiovascular health because inflammation, metabolism, the gut barrier, and vascular function are interconnected. In animal models of atherosclerosis, butyrate has been associated with reduced lipid deposition and macrophage accumulation in plaques, improved gut permeability, and fewer aortic lesions. The review also describes evidence that butyrate can reduce inflammatory cytokines such as TNF-A and IL-6. There is also preliminary human evidence in connecting butyrate with blood pressure. Higher fecal butyrate levels were inversely associated with hypertension and overweight in obese cancer survivors, while increases in butyrate over a year were associated with lower blood pressure. These findings are promising, but more research is needed. So then we go on to IBD. Butyrate's effects on IBD illustrate how its local and systemic functions can overlap. Inflammatory bowel conditions such as ulcerative colitis and Crohn's are associated with disrupted intestinal barrier function, altered microbiota, and excessive inflammatory signaling. Butyrate can strengthen the intestinal barrier while influencing immune cells and inflammatory pathways, including NF-XB. I'm not sure if that's XB. I'm not sure, that might be KB. The review reports that adding butyrate-based treatments to therapy for ulcerative colitis has been associated with improvements in inflammatory markers. One study involving butyrate-loaded microcapsules and reported sustained remission in most treated patients over 12 months. Then we're going to move on to cancer. Butyrate is also being investigated for its potential role in cancer. Its ability to inhibit HDAC enzymes is particularly significant because HDACs regulate how tightly DNA is packaged and therefore influence which genes are expressed. Butyrate has also been reported to influence immune responses, promote drug differentiation, reduce inflammatory cytokines, and affect pathways involved in tumor cell survival. This talk does not mean that butyrate is an established cancer treatment. Rather, it demonstrates why a microbial metabolite deserves attention beyond its traditional classification as a digestive compound. The same molecule can function as a fuel signaling molecule, immune regulator, and epigenetic modifier. So then we're going to move on to Alzheimer's. And this is where it gets astonishing. Perhaps the most intriguing expansion of butyrate research is the gut-brain connection. Gut and brain communicate through neural, immune, endocrine, and metabolic pathways. Microbial metabolites can participate in this communication, and some can enter circulation and potentially influence tissues beyond the intestine. The review specifically discusses the relationship between microbiota disruption and neurological conditions, including Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, autism, and they also mentioned Huntington's. Research indicates that butyrate can alleviate neurological disorders, including Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, autism, and Huntington's, by reducing neuroinflammation, enhancing neurotransmitter modulation, and improving histone acetylation. This focus will help unlock its full therapeutic potential for metabolic and neurological health, rather than exclusively on its well-known benefits for gut health. The mechanisms are especially interesting because butyrate can affect both receptor signaling and epigenetic regulation. Butyrate in multiple sclerosis, protecting myelin. Individuals with MS are found to be depleted in butyrate-producing bacteria and in bacteria that produce indole lactate. An intermediate in generation of potent neuroprotective antioxidant, indole propionate, which we found to be lower in their serum. We identify microbial and metabolite candidates that may contribute to MS and should be explored further for their causal role and therapeutic potential, according to Cell Reports Medicine in 2021. So multiple sclerosis is a demyelinating disease in which the protective myelin sheath surrounding nerve fibers is damaged, disrupting communication within the central nervous system. Research has identified differences in the microbiota of people with MS, including reductions in bacteria that produce short-chain fatty acids. A 2019 study published in Journal of Neuroinflammation, Chen and colleagues found that oral butyrate significantly reduced demyelination in a mouse model of MS. More importantly, experiments using mouse cerebellar tissue demonstrated that butyrate both suppressed demyelination and enhanced remyelination, even in the absence of microglia, suggesting a direct effect on oleodendrocytes, the cells responsible for producing myelin. Butyrate accelerated the maturation of oleodendrocytes rather than increasing the number of oleodendrocyte precursor cells, and the researchers proposed that its effects related in part to its activity as an HDAC inhibitor. These findings provide an important example of how a microbial metabolite produced in the gut can influence the biology of the central nervous system and support the possibility that maintaining adequate butyrate could contribute to mechanisms involved in myelin production and repair. Milk is another very important substance material in that link. Autism spectrum disorder is another area where researchers are investigating connections between the microbiome, metabolites, immune signaling, and neurological function. The review notes that suppression of HDAC activity is being studied in relation to autism-related cellular mechanisms, including changes in inhibitory GABAergic signaling. It also points to the broader role of the microbial metabolites in communicating with the nervous and immune system. So, again, this remains experimental. And again, once again, it's just they're going lower and lower to find the smallest substances with the greatest potential. A metabolite connecting multiple systems. The emerging evidence of butyrate lies in its ability to connect systems that were once studied separately. It supports the intestinal barrier, supplies energy to colon cells, regulates immune activity, influences inflammatory pathways, interacts with metabolic receptors, alters epigenetic signaling, and these mechanisms provide plausible connections between the microbiome, metabolism, cardiovascular function, and the nervous system. The evidence is promising, but more research. Much of the research remains preclinical, and human studies are still needed. This 2025 review concludes that future research should move beyond gut health alone and investigate butyrate's potential in cardiovascular disease, diabetes, obesity, and neurodegenerative disorders. The larger lesson is that gut health may only be the beginning of the butyrate potential, and when the beneficial bacteria ferment the right substrates, they produce metabolites capable of communicating with the rest of the body. Butyrate may be one of the clearest examples of how the microbiome can influence metabolism, immunity, cellular energy, and the brain. Understanding this interconnected system could eventually lead to more targeted dietary strategies, functional foods, and therapies designed not simply to support the gut, but to influence whole body health. Okay, there you have it. Just another important thing going on in the gut and what it produces, and then how many systems, whether you call that the root or the trunk. I personally would call that the trunk because short chain fatty acids, fermented, produce butyrate, which in turn is used by the microbes. So I would, just don't forget. Think of it as a tree. The tree had a seed. The tree had roots. The tree has branches. The leaves are the leaves are the fruit of the tree. There is the fruit or the leaves of the tree. And even when those leaves break down, as we know in autophagy, they send their food, nutrients, back down the trunk and back to the roots, I believe. So if you just begin to think of things like a tree with a foundation and roots and basic components, and then branching out again to affect other systems, that's how you should begin to see it, and that's how they're beginning to see it, because this research as of late, all of it post 2016, has been absolutely astounding to me, and I have many, many more papers to share with you regarding this and specific conditions and new specific markers and possibly diagnostics, etc., etc., etc. So, okay, everyone, this is probably way too long, but again, please, 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 and if you've already purchased and have given a review or haven't given a review, I would certainly appreciate a review because that is the only thing that is going to propel this within Amazon, which is what I need, is that community to begin taking notice without having to go outside and search for a particular book that isn't even on anybody's radar yet. So I really need the reviews. Some of you have been with me for a long time, so you do know, and some of you haven't. So, of course, your review isn't going to be as detailed, but the ones that have been with me and have purchased, I certainly would appreciate how the info in this book has helped you in the past to share with others. Please do that. That's the bottom line. This is getting way too large for any top-down system to deal with, to manage, to pay for, etc. And that's the bottom line. It's not happening. It's not going to happen. It's too overwhelming. It's from cradle to grave, as you just saw with autism and Alzheimer's. If you want to add a severe condition on top of that, like Huntington's, which I have had, one of my dearest friends died of Huntington's, and almost her entire family had it. Even the rarest form, the juvenile form, and it was devastating. It was very hard to watch, and it was a long, long suffering decline and death for her and her sibling, and the other members in her family who also have it. Okay, everyone. So that's just one more thing that keeps me going. But I thank you so much, and I appreciate everything so much. And another thing that would greatly help is if you like, share, and subscribe, because these are the baseline molecules on Earth, and there is nowhere else to go. So there's that. Okay, I'll see you next time. You have a great day and a great week. Bye.